saw him, they stopped in surprise, even the dog they were walking. He was definitely not a star, he was a terror. Freckles and warts, sunken cheeks and giant teeth sticking out over equally giant lips. It was not just that he was so scary, it was incredibly difficult for girls to like him, who sometimes could barely hold back their stomach contents when they saw him. It seemed that God himself could not stand him, drawing clouds with repulsive faces in the sky. The next moment, he turned toward the light. A truck plowed into him at full speed, his bag and sneaker flying away. Through the broken windshield, the driver said that the boy was so scared that he froze, and that's what happened. The boy on the ground felt a little funny, that someone still blamed his inability to drive on his appearance. In the shards of glass, he could see his blood spreading on the asphalt. He had just thought that if he made a wish before he died, it would definitely come true in the next life. Tion dreamed of getting rid of his ugly face, and feeling on his skin what it was like to be a nice guy. His eyes went dark, and the whole night passed. Tion felt himself again. Opening his eyes, he heard a girl's laughter. It didn't seem like he had died. Looking around, he realized that he was in the hot waters, where many young ladies were washing. They were laughing and joking with each other. The boy could not believe that he was awake. It was hard to accept the reality of such a picture. Some of the girls seemed to notice him, and he was afraid that he would scare them. But this did not happen. They continued to look at him and smile. Their beauty and defenselessness was striking. One of them hugged his hand, emphasizing that she would not bite him. The other began to look at his face, envying his gracefulness and white skin. Now Tion had just such a face, in addition to his long, luxurious hair. Being among the beautiful ladies who surrounded him on all sides, a situation that all men dream of, made his nose bleed. One of the girls screamed when she saw this. She asked if her sister was okay, addressing the guy like that. Tion was thinking that it was good to have snow white skin and a pretty face, and his eyes were even a little teary. But looking into the water, he saw himself wearing the same outfit as the girls around him. Hugging him even closer and taking off his clothes, the girls offered to wash their sister. But when they took off their clothes and saw that the boy was not their sister at all, one of them was horrified. The next moment, a scream erupted in the bathhouse, and the boy was violently thrown out. It seems that the body originally belonged to a man with the same name. He was the son of a family of martial arts masters, but he was driven away. And to further humiliate him, to emphasize his unworthiness, he was given women's clothes and put on the street. Dressed in whatever clothes he had, he wandered for several days, until his weak body gave out, and he fainted. A girl was riding a horse on the road near where he was lying. She rescued him, taking him to a place called Meow Zone. Now he was sitting on the floor tied up, kneeling on the floor, claiming that he was just mistaken, because he did not know that men were not allowed to visit them. This time, the well-dressed ladies were angry, and did not believe him. He tried to assure them with a silly face that it was a misunderstanding, and they themselves tried to help him take a bath. This made them blush, and even angrier. The next moment, one of them announced that the mistress was here. A lightly dressed, long-haired girl, riding a giant sword, flew through the high open door, her clothes fluttering with speed. The young ladies bowed their heads before her, and the boy froze in admiration of her beauty. Her long black hair was adorned with a blue flower, and a crescent moon hairpin. Her lilac eyes looked straight ahead with confidence, and the golden armor on her shoulder indicated her status. The next moment, the girl was illuminated by bursts of magical flows that she had summoned herself. Staring at the mistress, the boy hoped that at least she would be reasonable. Smiling awkwardly and calling her sister, the mistress, he awkwardly addressed her. She coldly replied that there was nothing to discuss, and that his head would fall off his shoulders. He was horrified, and shouted to be at least listened to. But the next moment, the sword was already at his neck, and he clenched his teeth and closed his eyes. Now he thought that this was not the best rebirth in the world. The sword stopped short of its target, because someone's voices were coming from outside. The newcomers hadn't expected that someone was one step ahead of them, and was about to join in the fun. Tion opened his eyes. He could not believe that someone had come to rescue him. The next moment, the mistress was asking who dared to invade their Meow Zone sect. Breaking down the window, 4 men jumped in and freed him from his bonds. He looked back at the rescuers and thanked them, but they did not look like do-gooders at all, quite the opposite. They called themselves the 4 Thieves, and after calling the girl a witch, they promised to raise the place to the ground. The boy did not expect such a turn of events, and thought that he had mixed up the scenario when he imagined it. The mistress kept asking him if he was with them, but the boy assured her that it was a misunderstanding. But the next moment, the big guy from the 4 moved his talking face out of the way with a slight movement of his hand. He said that he didn't have to admit it, but they had come to capture the witch alive. The girl immediately rushed at them with her sword. She was getting closer and closer to the big man, and the next moment the rest of the girls fell to the ground. The mistress herself, having not reached her goal, could barely stand up, and did not understand what those villains had done. One of the 4 dark-haired men proudly declared that they had only added something to the water. Dropping her sword, the mistress also lay on the ground next to the other girls, unconscious. The next moment, the blonde one of the 4 was holding the boy by the collar, and putting his sword to his throat, and asking what they were going to do with this baby. Tion realized that he was too weak now, and that he should just play the fool. He knelt down with his palms together in front of his chest, and said with a happy expression, and a shining in his eyes, that his inspiration for them was as boundless as a river. And although they came a little late, he would like to be accepted as their younger brother. Despite their surprised faces, he noted that the witch and sisters had been captured as ordered, and asked what the brothers were going to do with the prisoners. The big man smiled and drooled, saying that no explanation was necessary. He imagined himself lying in a chamber, and being entertained by 4 beauties with food and laughter from all sides. One of them was temptingly exposing her shoulder. While he was dreaming, the boy said he would go to them first. The big guy, still drooling over his fantasies, agreed without thinking. But the next moment, he came to his senses, and accused the boy of trying to ask the witch for salvation. Tion was confused at first, but immediately pulled himself together. He said that he remembered an important thing that concerned the prosperity and well-being of his older brothers. This interested the big guy, and he asked to continue. The boy told him that although his brothers were wise and skilled in martial arts, the witch dared to oppose them with her sect. He went on to say that the number of people decides, and 4 people had already listened to him. The best way out for them would be to start their own sect of villains, gathering thieves from all over the world and committing various outrages in the name of their leader. The boy drew them a picture of how many people would come to their secret place to worship the leader. The sect would be the main refuge for all the unclean, the source of all evil, and would be revered all over the world. The 4 melted into dreams, and listened to every word. He added that the most important thing now is to choose a leader, and only then look for associates, and emphasized that only one person can have power. The big guy immediately appointed himself as the leader, but his partners grabbed their weapons, and were about to start a riot. The next moment, they were already punching each other in the face, deciding who would be in charge. Seizing the moment, the boy tiptoed away from them. The mistress lay unconscious in her chamber, her hands tied to the bed with ropes and gagged. The next moment, she woke up to the sound of the door opening and a figure standing in the passage. She struggled against a hand reaching for her face. A boy's face appeared in the shadows, whispering and gesturing for her to be quiet. Tion assured her that he would save her and remove the gag. The girl asked why he came to her aid, since she had wanted to kill him earlier. The guy did not hold any grudges, releasing her hands and emphasizing that it was all just a misunderstanding, and she was too good for that. He reflected that the choice between the sect of beauties and these uncouth fools was obvious. After releasing her, he asked her to get out of here before the guys realized anything. The girl really believed that it was all a misunderstanding, because the guy had set it up. Her sword was already on his shoulder. Tion, frozen, asked if it was a joke, and she told him the whole story of how he had ordered his henchmen to poison them. He pretended to be a prisoner, then somehow sent a signal to his henchmen, and now he was pretending to be a hero saving the princess. He told her that her head was making up too much, but she just frowned and squeezed the machete harder. They had nothing more to talk about, and she was going to kill him first. But the next moment the door opened, and behind it the four were arguing about how they had been tricked by this guy. The big guy ordered them to kill him first, and they would talk later. The boy froze sitting on the bed, and the girl next to him wondered if his intentions to save her were true. The big man swung his sword right at him with a scream, and the next moment, pink smoke filled the room and ate his eyes. When he opened them, there was no one in front of him. He angrily punched himself in the chest, and ordered himself to chase them. The boy and girl locked themselves in a stone room from their pursuers. The four were furious that they were stopped by a door. The blonde advised the big guy to retreat until the witch regained her strength completely. But the dark-haired man took out a capsule with poison. It was colorless and odorless, and a small amount of it was enough to make a person go crazy. The big guy asked if this situation would not be good for the guy who was locked up with the beauty. But the dark-haired man assured him that the witch would not let anyone touch her, and that his plan was to force them out. He opened the capsule and brought it to the bottom of the door, and a subtle smoke penetrated inside. Tion immediately began to suffer from suffocation and thirst. His face was drenched in sweat. The girl felt the same way. Her face turned red. He wanted to say something to her, but she couldn't take it anymore and moved toward the door. But the guy grabbed her arm and pulled her back, causing her to lose her balance and fall into his arms. She looked up at him in surprise and blushed. Her lips parted. The next moment, she put both her arms around him, and they kissed passionately. The next moment, he woke up to someone's voice, and behind him was a fresco of a sage. The image told him to stop looking around and turn to it. The deity's name was Jun, and he was the greatest on this continent when he lived. He ordered the boy to drop his blood on the mural to free him. Hearing this, the stone-faced boy turned away from the deity. He reacted by screaming, how dare he ignore him? The boy wondered how this mighty uncle had gotten stuck here, but in this situation, there was no other way out. The girl was sitting on the floor with her head down on her knees and wailing, so he decided to give it a try. Biting his finger, he ran it across the fresco. The outline of the sage shone with light, and the wind rose. The girl fell to the ground, and a silver-haired man appeared behind the boy who rushed to her. He kept his hand on the shoulder of the frozen boy and assured her that her loss of consciousness was temporary. At the same time, he asked her to lend her body to the deity. The next moment, the door opened, and the four were surprised at his recklessness, as he seemed to have really gone mad to come out of there alone. The deity in the boy's body, crossing his arms over his chest, said that he had expected to stretch his bones, but he hadn't expected so few enemies, so why not just deal with them himself? The four began to laugh at his talking to himself, and thought he had simply lost his head from the poison. The big guy shouted that he was dead, and the next moment his partners rushed at the boy with weapons, shouting at him to go to hell. But he didn't even move. Their swords and blades bounced off some barrier. The guy said that he was already dead, and waved his bare hand like a tiger, which sent the blades of the attackers flying. The next moment, their surprised faces were flying away from the shield. They didn't understand what was happening, and hid behind the big guy, offering him to deal with it himself. The big man told him not to panic. He had another plan. As he disappeared from sight, he shouted that the 36 strategy was the best. The henchman hurried after him, and asked him not to leave them. Meanwhile, the deity raised his palm up, and a sword of white light appeared above it. He had not used it for a long time, and wondered if he had lost his skill. Yellow streams of energy hovered around him, and in the next moment, they caught up with the fugitives. They enveloped their bodies, and the next moment each of their faces met the ground. The deity began to lose consciousness and fall. Now the mistress caught him in her arms, and asked him what had happened, and where the four were. The boy was already himself. He was surprised to see her, and that she had already come to her senses. He explained to her, enjoying her embrace, that a voice had spoken to him, and wanted to use his body to protect him from his attackers, and he did not remember the rest. She examined his hand, looking for traces of spiritual energy, but it seemed that the ancestors had indeed intervened. The guy melted away from the hug, and was about to lay his head on the girl, but was immediately pushed away from such impudence. She said that it really looked like a misunderstanding, that even though he had invaded their territory, he had protected them. The lady hugged his hand, and said that she could not pay him back with anything but a promise to do so later. She hoped he would understand. The boy agreed, and since his merits and transgressions were equal, he would remain in the sect as a household worker for the rest of his life. The part about his whole life was stunning, as if she had just promised him one thing and then another. Chopping wood, the guy was thinking, it seemed to him that after the rebirth, he would have many wives and concubines waiting for him, but his story went in a different direction. The next moment, clothes flew into his face. One of the girls held a whip, and reminded him that he still had a lot of work to do, and he could not refuse as they were all martial arts masters, and he with his weak body could not resist them at all. The next moment, a voice in his head asked him why he shouldn't ask the deity for strength. A silver-haired man appeared behind him, yawning and stretching. The boy asked him where this crazy man had been, because he had called him so many times, and if he had appeared just to smile. The man replied that he had been sealed for centuries, and that in order to save the boy, he had to use a lot of spiritual energy, and it took some time to restore it. Tion asked him if he was serious about the power, and he replied that if he accepted the deity as his master, he would teach him. But to become his disciple, he had to meet a number of requirements. The boy replied, continuing his work, that he was more satisfied with his previous words, but now, he did not seem to be a very reliable teacher. The silver-haired man was furious. A bunch of people were begging him for mentoring, and this asshole was saying he was unreliable. He slammed the boy's head into the floor, and ordered them to call him teacher. Immediately switching to a friendly tone, he wanted to explain the system of cultivation before starting the training. In this world, spiritual energy was the foundation. Every skill needed it. And the higher your level, the greater your supply of spiritual energy, and the purer it is. In addition, depending on the strength of spiritual energy, it is divided into 8 levels in the form of a pyramid. At its top is the ascension, below it are the heaven and the silver moon. Below are the earth, the mysterious jade, and the yellow sprout. Tion. At the very bottom are the frozen wind and the tempering body. Each of them, with the exception of body tempering, is divided into 9 more classes. Tion realized that he had to get to the first level first to start climbing the pyramid. But what kind of body tempering could he talk about if he was kicked out of his family precisely because his dirty blood was unfit and prevented his body from improving? But Silverhair denied it. There was nothing wrong with the boy's blood. The last time he inhabited him, his blood was not dirty. On the contrary, it was one of the purest in 1,000 years. If he was right, someone had sealed his blood. This surprised the boy, and he thought that the previous owner of the body had pissed someone off without knowing why. The teacher promised to help him, giving him a list of things to find. He would help him find a medicine to cleanse the bone marrow, which would unlock the seal and restore his vitality.